Okay, you know what Simpsons is, and you know what Iceberg charts are. I don't need to explain any of that. Something I do want to go over, though, is Glup Shitto, and specifically defining the term of it. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, but in case if you never heard of this somehow, what this is that this comes from this post that was poking fun at Star Wars naming schemes for their characters, as well as fans' reactions to them, and it since then has been adopted as an actual term and tongue-in-cheek term of endearment. Now, something I want to clarify though, which I said when I first posted this chart, is that it might seem like that Glup Shitto just refers to an obscure or odd character, but that's kind of misleading. It more specifically refers to characters, at least I think so, who have very brief appearances, just very brief few second scenes, or appearing simply in the background for a moment, and the most general audience will have no idea that this character even has a name, and they have no specific role in the main part of the series. They might get spin-offs though. And despite all of that, these characters might often end up having cult followings within the fandom. This is what this chart is going to go over, characters who fit this definition in The Simpsons. Now, I also need to say that this is going over characters who debuted and their appearances throughout the classic series, as in the first 8 seasons, the Golden Era. This is because, 1, that's just what I like talking about, and 2, if I went beyond that, then this would be way too big and probably eventually just get oversaturated and uninteresting. So yeah, I'm sticking to that, and if a character was a Glup Shitto specifically during that or not. However, if they made more appearances afterwards, then I will make note of it as I explain it. Aside from all of that, just the usual, this is a series, so make sure you have each video ready as it's around and the playlist open, yada yada. Let's go. Mr. Largo, we are starting out with the quintessential example of a Simpsons Glup Shitto. Mr. Largo, as you know, is Lisa's music teacher, and he's very interesting because, despite his limited appearances, he is the most prominently featured character in the intro, aside from the Simpsons family themselves, making him one of the most recognizable characters in the show, despite the fact that he hardly did anything throughout the classic era. Like a lot of characters that you'll see on here, he was mainly relevant during the first 1 or 2 seasons, especially season 1, where it was clear that they kind of wanted to make him more of an actual character who did stuff, before dropping that. Throughout the classic era, he only had a couple of small scenes, very small background appearances, and there's only 2 actual notable scenes that happen. One where he saved Lisa from drowning, and no, that wasn't a dream, and then of course, no one likes Milhouse! And despite those small appearances, everybody recognizes this guy's face. Mr. Largo would go on to become more used in the later seasons, even gaining a boyfriend who unfortunately is kind of a piece of shit to him, but at least he got something, I guess. Get ready for more themes of these types of characters as this goes on. Janie. Okay, I need to apologize because I made a mistake on the actual Iceberg image itself. I wrote Jamie instead of Janie just because I'm so used to hearing it that way that I forgot that's actually Janie. Anyways, Janie is Lisa's quote-unquote friend, on and off again, fair weather friend as she's been described officially before, whereas she's sadly kind of the only thing that Lisa has to a close friend like Bart usually gets, and she switches constantly from being friendly to Lisa to suddenly berating her and just throwing her off to the side and under the bus. Janie, like Mr. Largo, is very recognizable, probably because she is the closest thing that Lisa has to a real friend, despite all of that. And she also is barely used, even less than Mr. Largo in terms of notable scenes, I would say, even beyond the classic era. Yet she's made numerous background appearances, and she has somewhat of a following. Lewis and Richard, yes, the classics. Bart's old friends, who again were more relevant in the first couple of seasons, where they would always appear alongside him in Millhouse, and they were dropped much more hardly afterwards. They didn't do anything too significant aside from just being there, and the most roles that they had was kind of like copying that photo of Homer around. But after that, I guess they decided that Bart really only needs like one main friend if we're going to focus on a bunch of characters. However, despite that, they didn't really fill roles of Bart like temporarily doing other things with other kids, which is kind of sad for them. Because, like, you know, when they went to Shelbyville, Bart took, like, Nelson and Martin, and same when they went on that little, like, Fun Fest road trip together. There might be an alternate universe where instead of those guys, it was Lewis and Richard who went with them, and speaking of that former episode, Lewis is right there, but Bart just ignores him anyway. And yeah, they really got casted off to the side hard, like, damn. Again, they're popular though because of their old roles as Bart's friends, as well as them being familiar faces who continue to appear afterwards. Lewis got a bit of an upheaval after the classic series doing some things, while Richard was very much thrown off to the side. In fact, I don't know if he's ever been added since, but I remember hearing people point out how Lewis isn't tapped out, but Richard never was, and Richard, I'm sure a lot of people probably forgot just because of like his specific disappearance later in the series, but they both have been appearing in the background since. Blue-haired lawyer, yes, the most recognizable evil lawyer in Springfield. Well, Mr. Burns' lawyer specifically, which I believe he's called in the script sometimes. He has a very recognizable voice, but he's never been given an actual name beyond that, and yeah, he's never been given any sort of major roles in any sort of episodes, just appearing whenever some sort of court case needs to happen, and he's a pretty popular character despite all of this, and yeah, when it comes to lawyers, aside from, like, obviously Lionel Hutz, who, you know, unfortunately is not on the show anymore for obvious reasons, this guy is the most well-known. Sam and Larry, if it weren't for a certain recent episode, these two would probably be down another layer or two, but here they are at the tip. These are the two barflies who would always appear in the background at most tavern, and they never had any real sort of role or even much lines of dialogue aside from just grunting and look everybody, Homer's back. Despite that, I don't know when these two were given out loud names precisely, but, you know, they're Sam and Larry, and because they kept appearing for so long just being there, they got sort of a comfort spot, and, you know, of course fans are going to get attached to that. Then came a recent episode where one of them, Larry, passes away, and that got a lot of backlash with fans complaining about this being such a random sudden move, as well as it just overall being very poorly and distastefully handled to get rid of a minor yet very long-lasting character just like that, as well as the very odd decision that the other one, Sam, didn't at all appear in the episode. Charlie. This is the most recognizable power plant worker after, obviously, Homer, Carl, and Lenny. And for some reason, finding images of this guy is really difficult, but he's here and he's very recognizable because, again, he's the most recognized power plant worker after the obvious trio. And he's had some pretty funny moments in the original classic series, and, you know, there's a whole entire dental plan, Lisa needs braces, where he interrupts Homer's train of thought, and it's kind of a meme too, to kind of like rag on this guy and see him as like hateable or useless, and yeah, despite all of that, again, he's never had any sort of major role beyond this. Snowball the First. Well, I guess the name would technically just be Snowball, but this lets you know specifically who I'm talking about. This is a character who's rarely ever appeared. A lot of people probably never even seen them or can remember when they appeared. However, it's a character that everyone knows exists subconsciously, which makes them a unique Glup Shitto in this case, being that since the main cat that everyone knows is called Snowball 2, Snowball 1, you know, subconsciously you know that it's had to exist before. And we get to see Snowball 1 very early on when Bart dies and starts going to heaven. You can see him pass by Snowball 1, complete with the tire marks and everything, poor thing. And Snowball 1 is mentioned in Simpsons Roasting on Open Fire, where they have just recently passed away before the series officially began, which is pretty sad. And no, rest in peace, Snowball 1. You still live on in all of our hearts. Jub Jub, ending this off with pets still. Jub Jub is the pet's iguana, I believe this is, that was passed on to Selma after their aunt had passed away. And Jub Jub has made minor appearances, usually alongside just Selma sometimes. But despite that, everybody loves Jub Jub. He's exactly where you always want him to be, and Jub Jub has had so many classic moments and huge shouts to Jub Jub, such as getting scared, and like what I just quoted with him being found in the box and everyone loving him. So yeah, Jub Jub is very popular despite never having any sort of significant role. Anyways, next up is Underwater with weirder Glup Shittos.